Hello, thanks for looking in on my videos. So this is another case study. Just a reminder that I change all the names of the places, some of the dates and some of the other facts as well, so as to disguise the information. So this was a court report that I had to prepare for Crown Court. I had to go and visit the offender in prison. I should call him Mike. Mike was 26 years old. Right from the outset, I want to explain that I didn't receive any advanced disclosure package, which is the bundle that explains it's got statements about the offence, facts about the offence, previous convictions, other information, the antecedents, all that kind of information. And it was very difficult because this guy originated from Berkshire. He came from Reading, was in the area where I was working. I call it Barchester, no such place, but there might be. Apologies to Barchester if there is a real one, but I've adopted the name that I was working in Barchester, to disguise where I was actually working. And he offended in another area. So we had no knowledge of this guy. Nobody told us that he was in our area. I had no information. And for me, I don't know how the probation service, the ethos back then was we were pushed to get on and write this report within the deadline to save the court time and money. But actually, why weren't probation management standing up and saying it's unacceptable to expect probation officers to prepare court reports without the advanced disclosure package? Looking back all these years later, I think it was absolutely outrageous that we didn't have this package and why we couldn't say, no, we're not preparing a report without this advanced disclosure package. Important in this case because all I was going on was going to interview the fella and I couldn't really check what he was telling me. He could have told me an absolute load of rubbish and he could have told me a load of lies, and I think it's absolutely outrageous. And then you expect a probation officer to provide a risk of the person reoffending and a risk of harm to the public based on what? On interviewing the fella? I really, I kind of feel that back then, I think probation were unassertive, really, and we should have stood up to the other agencies and say, look, and I don't know who was in charge of the Crown prosecution time at that time. I wonder, was it the current Prime Minister? I don't know, but, I'm talking about the 1990s. Do write in somebody if you know. But I just think it was not on to expect probation to do these reports without the advanced disclosure packages. And I've spoken elsewhere how I felt at times probation were disrespected, actually. That's another aside anyway. But, so, it involves more work. I had to phone around. I had to use my own devices, really, to get as much information about this guy as possible. And what's more, he'd been under police protection. Isn't that interesting? So, what he was up for was burglary, domestic burglary, which is one of the terrible offences, isn't it? So, he was before the court for 2 domestic burglaries and he breached bail. He failed to turn up to court and done a runner, basically. So, from his account, he was caught going into the rear of a house. A neighbour saw him and the police came and arrested him, nicked him before he was unable to steal anything from the house. Burglary number 2 was of a mobile home. He got in through a window using a screwdriver and he stole a TV and a video recorder. This is the 1990s. We had video recorders back then. He asked, interestingly, he asked for 16 other burglaries to be taken into consideration. A lot of crimes, isn't it? He owned up to them. These were all mobile homes. He had a technique of getting in through the window using a screwdriver, flipping the catch with a screwdriver. Too easy, really, by the sound of things. And he got away with 16 burglaries, stealing people's TVs and video recorders. He was selling them on to somebody, and in the eyes of the law, the person receiving this stolen goods is just as guilty as the person committing the burglary. You know, a way of cutting down crime is we also not only need to, you know, get the offenders who are committing the burglaries, but we also need to sort out the people who are receiving the stolen burglary goods. So what was his motive? It was to feed his horrendous drug problem that he had at the time. He was injecting heroin and he'd been using crack cocaine. From his account, he hadn't been using heroin for very long, but he'd been misusing drugs since he was 14 years old. 14 years old. He grew up, his parents, he grew up in Berkshire, in Reading. His parents split before his birth. He had dyslexia, got on really badly at school, learning difficulties, stopped going to school, started experimenting drugs age 14, began taking crack cocaine age 15. All his early offences were minor shoplifting, mostly loaves of bread, things like that, food and things like that. Now this worries me because if the police are not arresting people for these type of shoplifting offences anymore, who are the people who are committing these sort of minor shoplifting offences? Could be drug addicts, and they need to be really addressed, tackled as soon as possible, really. But if we're not arresting these people for shoplifting offences, I'm really worried. You know, you're making problems for the future because that offending's going to increase, isn't it? You need to get things early on. So anyway, now interestingly, he was made subject to a probation order in 1992. I've changed some of the dates, all right, but in 1992, and he did quite well. He stopped using drugs for a bit, largely by his own efforts, I think, because I understand. I will say, right, is to prepare this report, I'll go back that I had no information, was I contacted the local police, one of my contacts, who sent me his record of previous convictions, right? You need that to do a risk assessment, don't you? To see the patterns of offending or to write any sort of decent report, don't you? So I managed to get previous convictions. I phoned up his previous probation officer in Berkshire and got some helpful information. And I also, I don't know how, but I got a phone number of the police officer looking after him on the police protection scheme, which he was thrown off, actually, because he reoffended. So, you know, going back to that point, I had to make all that effort, all that time and energy to find out this information, which should have landed on my desk, shouldn't it? Not rather than me out to chase after it. So anyway, during that 3 years, 3-year gap between 1992 and 1995, he stayed out of trouble. He got a little job. He had a nice little girlfriend. But as soon as the relationship ended, he went back on drugs, back to his old ways and back to crime. When he was arrested this time, though, I don't think he was truthful with probation about the reasons for his offending, and he got made subject of a community service order twice. He never managed to do it. He was, you know, he had terrible drug problems, and he made exceptionally slow progress. He was turned to court for breach, and the order was suspended and they give him probation instead. And at about that time, even before he started on probation, he was taken into police protection. because he'd been witness to several serious incidents, apparently. I don't know what they are, nobody told me. So he was moved to a new area, which was Barchester, where I was working. And we weren't told, we should have been, that we had somebody moving into our area with his new girlfriend. But she decided, relationship over, and she wanted to get away from it all, and she went to live abroad with her brother. So he said he couldn't cope living on his own, interestingly. He couldn't cope living on his own. So off he went, and he had an old friend who lived in Yarmouth and who's a heroin addict. Sad thing, but when a drug addict's homeless, very often the only person that will welcome in to stay with them is another drug addict. And this guy was injecting heroin, and he got Mike. He started injecting heroin for the first time. Crime went up increasingly, and he went and did all these burglaries around Yarmouth, loads of them. Drugs really fuel crime massively, you know, substance misuse. You know, it's really, really bad. So, because of his offending, his witness protection scheme was ended, and there he is in prison. He was put on in the hospital wing, and he was put on a detox program, which was quite good. And really, the only thing that he was facing was custody. Long term, though, how on earth do we stop somebody like this offending? He's homeless. He ain't got any family ties. And he said, oh, I want to look up my dad. I think my dad will help me get a job and sort me out. I don't think that was realistic. And my only thought is, really, people like this, we need to get hold of them. And I actually think what might work is some sort of drug treatment rehab coming out of prison, where you go through a rehabilitation program and they help this person not only stay off drugs, but rehabilitate their lives and have some sort. I think it's costly, and that, you know, it has cost, but will save society money in the long run. Because just releasing a guy homeless, he's going to reoffend straight away. And the only other friends he's got now are druggies, aren't they? So I really, really feel, you know, the tried and proven method, one of the most successful methods of treating people with drug addictions is a residential rehabilitation program. And I kind of feel that's this case, really. And then I just want to vent again about the advanced disclosure. I really hope the probation service today don't have such nonsense going on, you know, expectation to produce reports without these packages, advanced disclosure, because, yeah, I think it's disrespectful, the probation. And then to criticise probation for not doing really good risk assessments, you can't really, unless you provide the full information, all right? So I think that's the message of this case study, is back in the day, in the 1990s, far too often we were compelled to do these reports really quickly, and it gave us more work to do without this advanced disclosure. So anyway, there you go. The troubles of a probation officer. Who's spoken out like this before? No one really, but the sort of things, you know, we're the kind of faceless people in society. Nobody really knows what probation do, and it's time that, you know, people found out a bit more. But I just, thinking back all those years ago, how on earth did I do? You know, it was quite a good report that I wrote, but I mean, I had to work at it, you know, and just to verify what he's saying, I had to ring round, talk to And as well, more for him because he was put on community service when he should have been honest to probation and said, I've got a drug problem, I need help with it. But he was trying to do community service order when he had quite a severe drug problem. And I don't know, didn't the probation service realise? Anyway, hope you found that interesting, and thank you for looking in on my channel, and very best wishes to you. Bye now.